rum agricole, like a rum agricole sour.
Yeah.
That sounds
but
good.
But split with the blanc vermouth.
With the vermouth.
Soften it.
Oh.
And blanc, too. Not the black.
Technically, we're live now. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the cocktail journey. Suddenly, I'm really thirsty, says Carl. Well, we are too. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rachel Eva. If you're just tuning in with us for the first time, if this is your first live stream with us, welcome to the cocktail journey. My name is Rachel Eva. Welcome to my home bar in my home. And we're thrilled to have Veronica Correa
yes.
with us today. Veronica comes from New York. I think she was born in New York?
All of it.
Born and bred and raised.
Yeah, all
and
three.
Cut her teeth at New York bars. And came to us in California like a year? It's 2 years ago, right?
So I had 1 year pre-pandemic California and then 1 year pandemic California. So
Yeah. She was just getting settled. A year here in San Diego and then shut down. But like most people in the hospitality industry, very creative, very ingenious, pivoting a lot this last year.
Yeah.
We're super excited to have her here for the first time.
And I was, grateful to be in San Diego as opposed to New York for the pandemic, for sure.
Oh my goodness. One of my really good friends lives in New York, and she said it was not fun.
No, because you're stuck in an apartment, you know? It's not like here where you're like, I can go out and sit on the balcony and enjoy the weather, go to the park. So.
To those of you who are still stuck in an apartment,
sorry.
We're sorry about that. We are here to make your time so much better on Thursday nights.
Oh, yeah.
So welcome. We have folks joining us from all over the country. If this is your first time here, or if you're one of those folks that likes to come and just like hang out on the sidelines, that's okay too. But please join in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're from so that we know who we're talking to. Because you can see us, but we can't see you. And it's always nice to know who's in the audience tonight. I see quite a few of our regulars here. Hi, John. Hi, Burgeon. You like the drop caught in midair in the picture. I know. So how many of you saw the Clover Club video? We posted that on our new Instagram channel. If you have not followed us on Instagram, the Cocktail Journey has a brand new Instagram channel. It's called tcj.321. And you can follow us there and see some beautiful photos, as well as we might be posting little snippets from the live stream in the future. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Diane. How's the weather there? It's nice here today. We're excited. Hi, Terrence. And you guys are thirsty, so we're going to have to get started making a Clover Club. We're going to make a lot of Clover Clubs today because there are quite a few different variations, and I think it would be fun to explore them all. John from Pittsburgh, good to see you. We've got Chicago, Columbus, Florida. John Park, thank you for your thumbs up on the video. If you guys haven't seen, John's been doing live streams much longer than we have on YouTube, so he's a great guy to have around. So for the Clover Club, do you want to say a little bit about the Clover Club? Well, V is, Veronica also goes by V. And she is going to give you a quick intro to the recipe that we're going to do tonight. I'm going to go grab the hot water and brew myself some tea. So for those of you that might be making a non-alcoholic cocktail with us tonight, grab any tea from your tea cabinet that has some kind of a botanical, potentially a floral element to it. I am using a rooibos tea with rose hips that actually I got at IKEA and I really like. It's really good.
You've got a great IKEA tea collection.
IKEA has some good stuff. IKEA and Trader Joe's. I just go there all the time. It's probably because I got kids. But so if you want to grab some tea, we're going to do a double brew strength tea, just like Brian Prugalida taught us. So you can get that going. Or if you're doing cocktails with us, listen to V introducing the Clover Club. I'm going to drop the recipe that we have published on the blog in the chat so you can get started. And if you would just give the audience a couple of tips as they're thinking about it, including the first thing I want to say is if you're going to make ahead of us, don't forget to dry shake before you shake with ice. She'll tell you more about that.
Oh, well, So, I mean, I feel like Rachel mentioned already, I think if we had our way, we'd probably make about 6 or 7 different types of Clover Clubs right now, because there are just so many different ways and iterations that you can see. Some are more simple and classic, true to the original copy of the Clover Club recipe, which is more like a sour, a traditional sour. So you've got your spirit, sugar, your citrus, and then, of course, we've got the modifier of the raspberries here, so the fresh fruit. But then there's the dry vermouth version that we love, and, of course, there's the raspberry syrup version. So we're going to try to squeeze in as many iterations as we can get in the next hour. Is that how long we have with you all? So we're going to see what we can do. As Rachel said, you're going to want to dry shake because we are using egg white, and you do not want to add iced tea or tin with egg white and then shake it and that's it. You need that egg to emulsify with all of the other ingredients in your cocktail first, and that's how you get that beautiful head on the cocktail, that froth that sits on top and just looks like a soft pillow. Pillow of egg and raspberry.
Yes. I love the Clover Club. We're going to do, you probably already mentioned it, but I put in the chat, this first recipe we're going to do is 2 ounces of gin, 3/4 ounce lemon, fresh lemon juice, 3/4 ounce simple syrup. You can do a 1-to-1 by weight ratio is what we usually do. Sometimes we use rich simple syrup on the show, and so we like to differentiate between those sometimes. And then for this first one, we're going to use fresh muddled raspberries. So there's a couple different ways to make the Clover Club. We have fresh raspberries here today, and we've also, excuse me, V, done the prep work to make a beautiful raspberry syrup. If you are on the Cocktail Journey email list, you would have gotten a recipe for this that you could have prepped ahead of time. But we're going to start with the fresh raspberries today for those of you that have just grabbed your groceries from the store and came right here.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Yeah, exciting. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab about 4 raspberries. I like to have a really prominent raspberry flavor. So I'm going to grab 4. And sometimes when you have muddled ingredients, sometimes you can get away with just shaking with the ice and that does enough. But I really want to make sure that I'm getting a lot of the flavor from those raspberries. So I'm going to muddle them. Find a muddler. There we go. So I'm going to muddle them, and I'm just going to press them and make sure that they are fully pressed. You don't need to get too aggressive unless you've got some extra tension you need to work out. It's totally fine. I know we're all still working from home. This is your moment. And then I'm going to add my citrus.
Did you you got your jigger, okay.
Yeah.
We were making cocktails beforehand, so we had to reset the bar real quick.
So we're going to do 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, and as always when you're making cocktails at home, it is so important to use fresh juice. Don't buy the plastic bottles of lemon and lime. You will do much better with just buying a lemon or a lime or 2. Mm-hmm. Right?
Look at these beautiful lemons that we have on display, you know?
So I'm going to go ahead and measure out 3/4 ounce. And I want to make sure I'm not shorting myself there either. So I want to make sure it's filled all the way to the 3/4 ounce line on my jigger.
Side note, if you're sitting in your house right now and you only have a plastic lemon full of juice that might look just as shiny as this, because these are really beautiful, don't let that stop you from making a cocktail. Make a cocktail right now with what you have, and then next time you want to make this cocktail, grab your fresh lemons and then experiment with what that difference tastes like. Oh, yeah. We promise you will not be disappointed.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like about the same cost, yeah? Mm-hmm. Like maybe even cheaper to just buy a couple of lemons. Mm-hmm. Right?
If you're the kind of person that like you need to extend the life of your lemons, you can put them in the fridge.
Yes.
But they tend to juice a little bit better when they're at room temperature, so you can take them out before you're gonna juice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna grab my simple syrup, and this is just gonna be equal parts sugar to water. Very easy to make, which is why we call it simple syrup.
It's so simple. Another thing you never need to buy from the store.
No.
Like ever.
Honestly, the simple syrups that are store-bought taste worse than anything you'll make at home. Like, even the least kitchen literate person can make a simple syrup better than what you'll find in a store.
It's really easy.
All right, so I added my 3/4. So in here I've got my muddled raspberry. I have 3/4 of lemon juice and 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup. So now we're going to get to the gin. Did you want to talk about the different gins that we use?
We were talking about this last week.
Yeah.
So if you've been a regular so far in the show, you'll know that we often reach for botanist because we like botanist a lot. But we were making Clover Clubs last week in preparation for this live stream, and we just thought that this would benefit from a bit more of a juniper forward gin.
Yeah.
So we're going back to Beefeater was our mainstay at our
Yeah.
bar forever and ever and ever. Amen.
I mean, it's a perfect mainstay. It's something that, like, I keep Beefeater stocked in my house at all times. So I'm going to pour 2 ounces of my gin. And if you can't find Beefeater, the most important thing is that you're looking for something that says London Dry Gin on it, or even a Plymouth Gin, very similar. Those would both work really well, but for that reason that Rachel mentioned, is you really want that juniper to come through because you've got all this fruit notes from the raspberry, and then the egg white can kind of cloud things up. So you want a gin that can punch through all of that. And I think it's time to shake.
Let's do it.
Can I get shaken?
So now that we're getting ready to the dry shake part, you got the egg white, yes?
Oh, no, we haven't.
I was just saying. You can crack your egg and do your egg white right in. The recipe calls for 1 egg white, and if you're wondering what that is by volume, egg sizes vary. If you're looking at a small egg, you might be just above a 1/2 or 3/4 ounce. If you got one of those big giant eggs, that could be a full ounce of egg white. And so if you want to measure by volume, you can measure about 3/4 of an ounce for this one.
Yep.
Sometimes they
Clump a little.
They gloop a little bit, like that. And the trick there
we go.
is you can beat it with a fork. I'm glad that happened because I wanted to kind of demonstrate.
Oh, yeah? I kind of got it perfect.
You got it.
here.
Okay, she got it perfect this time. If you crack some egg whites and you want to have like a little jar like this sit in the side, one way to make it really easy to pour, because they tend to just really gloop together, is to give it a quick beat.
Yep.
And it breaks it up and helps it to begin that sort of like mellowing out process.
And you'll notice when I'm measuring my ingredients, I'm never measuring over my tin, because if I had done that just then, my eggs might have totally just dumped right into my cocktail. So I'm kind of measuring my ingredients to the side of the tin. That way, if there's any spillage or anything like that, it is no big deal. I just have a little bit of a mess to clean up. All right, so 3/4 of an ounce of egg white.
I can't keep up with your comments tonight, you guys. You're already on fire. What is your tip? Because this happened to me. If you saw the Clover Club video, there was a moment where I was dry shaking and I was like, oh, it's telling me it's done, because it was starting to pop already.
Yeah.
And that happened to Tom here. I was dry shaking and the tins popped apart.
Yep.
I thought I had sealed the shakers well. Is this expected with egg whites?
So it's not necessarily the egg white, but it's the fact that you don't have ice in your tin, because when you add ice, the tins start to kind of shrink together and like meld together, right?
It helps create that stronger seal, right?
Yeah, it seals the tin much better. When you don't have any ice or anything in there and you're just doing a dry shake, it's very easy for them to kind of shift and pop apart. So you want to make sure, I'm going to seal it, but I'm also going to make sure that I'm holding my tin on either end so that it can't go anywhere. Sometimes I'll hold it with 2 fingers on the small shaker, on the small tin, and 2 on the larger one. So that way when I feel that it starts to kind of separate, but I know I'm not done with my dry shake quite yet, I can kind of just shift it together and seal it in. But you will want to be mindful of that, like just careful.
This would be the right time, if you're a little nervous about it, to use 2 hands for shaking.
Use 2 hands. I'm going to use one, and like I said, the way that I'm gripping it, I've got 2 fingers on one end and 2 on the other, so I'm just being mindful and making sure it's not coming apart.
She's a pro.
And again, you're looking for aeration here, so none of these little, maraca shakes, you wanna really make sure that you're whipping these egg whites along with the ingredients in your cocktail, because that's what's going to give you that beautiful froth on top.
Yeah. How long do you dry shake?
Depends how much froth I'm looking for, but I'd say about 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Those of you who have been exposed to the Ramos Gin Fizz know all about shaking.
Oh, yeah.
And you know about, foamy heads there.
I also start to feel, it feels a little bit lighter in the tin almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like as the cocktail aerates, it starts to feel the weight of the shake feels a little bit different once that egg white is fully incorporated. So I've got a lot of, you can't see, so let's add ice.
Okay. So a couple of things I wanted to mention. Actually, let me go through before I just keep gabbing and see if y'all have any questions. This is a perfect time if you've made your first Clover Club and something didn't go right, like Tom saying, my shakers popped apart. Or if you want to ask a question as you're making it or thinking about making your second cocktail, put it in the chat and we'll talk about basics. And then what we like to do is sometimes we have some like more advanced or nerdy kinds of explorations. We're going to get into that in the second half of the live stream. Right now, we just want to make sure that everyone, whether if this is your first cocktail that you're making, wow, congratulations. The Clover Club is an incredible cocktail to start with as your first one. We want to make sure that you and those of you who maybe have never shaken a cocktail before feel confident doing that and you can have a great drink in your hand. So ask those questions and then we're going to get into some of the more complicated stuff in a bit.
All right. So I actually added my ice to my other tin. The cocktail's in this small one here because I didn't want it just sitting and kind of melting. I want to make sure that I'm controlling all of the components of my cocktail as much as possible. So I'm only going to add liquid to ice once I know I'm absolutely ready for my drink. I've got my glass set up.
Which is pre-chilled, right?
Pre-chilled glass.
She's waiting for me to shut up.
No. All right, so, and again, also, you're going to want to fill as Rachel said, if you're newer to making cocktails, you're going to want to fill your tin pretty high here. Because, again, you're looking for aeration and dilution. So if you add too few ice cubes, and I know that can be challenging if you're using just standard freezer ice, but 1 or 2 ice cubes, they'll melt very quickly and they're not going to give you the aeration that you need for the cocktail. And your volume might look a little wonky. It'll come out kind of watery. So I filled my tin as high as it can go, almost 3/4 of the way with ice. And now I'm only going to stop once my tin starts to get nice and frosty. Frothy? Frosty.
Frosty with frothy cocktail on the inside.
Frothy cocktail, frosty tins.
So we're having lots of good conversation in the chat about egg white, volume of egg white. I'm not going to name you all because I read a lot of your comments, but it takes a lot to go back and look at who said what. John said he cut back the egg white to about 1/4 ounce. Mm-hmm. And there's actually another recipe that we're going to go over that uses only 1/4 ounce. And so, yes, 3/4 ounce could be maybe the upper limit in terms of egg white in a cocktail. That's going to give you a lot of that beautiful frothy foaminess. If you don't want a lot of that going on in your drink, you can absolutely reduce the amount of egg white that you include. And then one of the things we did want to get into is pasteurized egg whites and or vegan egg white substitutes, which are also perfectly acceptable and do well in these cocktails. Yeah. But look at that. One of the things I want to draw your attention to, this is almost my favorite part of this cocktail because after you strain it and pour it in, look at that wash line. It's just beautiful. It's almost this one kind of creamsicle-y, beautiful raspberry creamsicle color. And then as it sits, the foam begins to separate from the body of the cocktail and make that really nice, beautiful, creamy top. And it's just this magical moment. It's this magical moment of like that I love about the ritual of cocktail craft is this sort of resolve And I think it's just a special moment between maybe somebody who makes the cocktail and the guest they're making it for, to just stop for a moment and appreciate what just happened before somebody takes their first sip.
Yeah, because at this point as the bartender, you would be, clearing your station, setting up the garnish if you're going to provide a garnish, setting the napkin down, etc. And that kind of gives the egg white time to separate and settle. It looks beautiful.
It's beautiful. Well, I am abstaining from spirits for at least the next 3 months. So this is your cocktail.
Okay. Well, cheers, guys. Thanks for joining us today. I'm so happy to be here with you.
You can raise your glass. I'm going to raise my, we did a non-alcoholic version, which didn't turn out really great. But
it needed
cheers.
a little work.
It needed a little work, so we can make the better version next.
And one thing I love to do, especially with this cocktail, because you've got that botanical gin, give it a nice whiff when you bring it to your nose. I mean, it just smells so beautiful. And of course, our sense of scent or smell is a huge factor in what we taste. So give it a nice smell, get all those botanicals and the fresh raspberry. Nice.
Maria says, success, my first attempt with egg whites. It looks beautiful. Great tips from everyone. Looks delicious. Tastes wonderful. It doesn't last that long.
That's a problem.
They do go down quite easy. And Todd says, we did just try aquafaba. Didn't taste any of the chickpea flavor. It did fluff it up and change the texture. More thick mouthfeel. So let's talk about that. If you are somebody who is not excited about using raw egg white in your cocktail, that could be for a couple of reasons, and that's totally fine. You might be a vegan and you're like, eggs are off the limit for me, off the table. You can use something called aquafaba. I tried really hard to get some today, and I could not find some in terms of a last minute. I should have ordered it off Amazon last week and had it delivered to my home, but I like to support my local businesses, and I waited too long. And they're out because there's also a Fee Brothers foaming sort of egg substitute that you can use. They're on back order for a lot of reasons. And so if you want to try the aquafaba, I actually considered using a can of chickpeas and making my own, but the liquid in the chickpea can has salt in it. And I was like, okay, this is a no-go.
Yeah, I certainly would not use, if that's what you have and it does have salt, which it likely does, I would
Todd, you did that.
avoid it. Oh?
Todd, so he just poured it off the top of a can of chickpeas. I'm curious, Todd, did your chickpeas have salt in them? And if so, is that necessarily a bad thing? Because I know that John Schmidt is a huge fan of adding saline solution.
Yeah, I was
to
going to say typically
salt
will make your cocktail taste a little bit sweeter. It'll kind of tone down any bitter elements in the cocktail. So it really just depends how much salt is in the chickpeas. So I'm very curious to hear.
I will go open a can of chickpeas. If we have time today, I will open a can of chickpeas and we'll try it. But we wanted to present that as a substitute. It's called aquafaba. It's been in the chat, AQUAFABA. And you can order it online if you can't find it at your local grocer. Not even Whole Foods or Lazy Acres or anyone had it.
It's tough to find. I mean, yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
It is hard.
Cocktail specialty stores might have them, but I would definitely look for somewhere that's got a big vegan section.
Good vegan grocer.
Yeah.
Todd said it has salt, but he didn't really taste it. So there you go. There's your at-home hack. Open a can of chickpeas, put them in a salad tomorrow, use the liquid tonight. And then the other option, some people are a little iffy about raw eggs because of the potential salmonella concerns. And that can go a lot of different ways. I think the fresher eggs you use, if you're using organic, free range. I mean, we had chickens for years in our backyard, and so we would just go get an egg that was laid that day, and we had the freshest eggs in the world. But you can buy pasteurized egg whites at the store. You can buy them in a carton. You can also buy pasteurized eggs, whole eggs that have been pasteurized, which means they've been heated to a degree where they're not cooked, but it's been heated enough that it kills off any kind of salmonella or bacteria. Sometimes they can be a little funny if you're making scrambled eggs. It might affect the texture a little bit, but it would be perfectly fine for use in a cocktail.
Perfect for cocktails.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect the cocktail much at all.
But
I've not had any issues with egg white. However, I will say I, for a long time, was somebody that wasn't necessarily squeamish about it, but I didn't always love the mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm definitely with whoever it was who said the 1/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce.
Of the egg white?
For personal taste. However, I mean, if you just look at the head of this cocktail, that's what you get when you use 3/4 of an ounce of egg white. Any less, and you wind up with just a bit of a thinner head on the cocktail. Mm-hmm. So,
so it depends. Are you going to go for the presentation? Do you like that really creamy, viscousy mouthfeel? Mm-hmm. To quote Brian Prugalidad, you taste first with your eyes.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think presentation is something to consider. And you could even just dial it down to a 1/2 ounce if you want to be in between. But play around with your egg white preference, and you'll find the one that you prefer.
Then nose, then mouth, yeah.
Oh, Tom says it's easy to pasteurize your own eggs if you have a sous vide. Ooh. So for those of you foodies in the house, you can chat Tom on our future Discord channel when we get that up and running, or whatever it is. All right. Should we do... My tea is still a little warm, so I'm going to wait and not make this yet, my non-alcoholic version. But we should do another version of the Clover Club. And we could do... I think we should do Julie's. You want to do Julie's?
I think, yeah, it deserves a mention.
Why don't you... you tell us about that. You're from New York.
So if anybody has been to New York or is a big fan of New York cocktail bars, you will have heard of the Clover Club. They're in Brooklyn, owned by Julie Reiner, a huge inspiration of mine, and definitely a role model. And clearly the bar is named after the cocktail, right? The cocktail was created in, 18...
Oh, gosh.
First listed, at least.
The very first a little bit of history.
Yeah.
The very first published recipe of the Clover Club was in the New York Press in 1901. But it didn't originate in New York, actually, even though I think the Clover Club cocktail bar is in New York.
Yes.
It actually originated in Philadelphia, and it was the drink of a men's club that met at, I think it was the Bellevue Stratton Hotel. And this men's club, the club was called the Clover Club, and it was this gentleman's club. And this was like the drink of the club. It was like their club drink. And so it was originally, it's this beautiful, what I think of as a beautiful romantic cocktail. And it originated with like a bunch of intellectuals sitting in dark wood-paneled booths.
Specifically.
Men only, no women allowed. So it's like, here we are.
Yeah. But then,
we're going to reclaim this.
Then Tom Bullock's The Ideal Bartender. So that initial recipe was listed as the sour, basically, that we just made, right?
So the original one that was published, so it went from Philadelphia, from the Bellevue Stratford Hotel in the 1880s to the 1920s is when that club was going. And then it migrated to New York because I think one of the... I'm going to have to get my name straight, right?
The bartender had shifted bars, yeah.
The bartender shifted bars and moved to... Oh, when George Bolt George Bolt was recruited as a proprietor for the Waldorf Astoria in New York. And that's when it showed up in New York and then was published in the New York Press in 1901. Right. And that originally recipe just called for gin, raspberry syrup. Oh, we got to make one with raspberry syrup.
Yes.
Lemon juice, and egg white. But then...
in The Ideal Bartender, so that's Tom Bullock's book, which I believe was published in 1907 or so. Mm-hmm. That one calls
1917.
1917.
Yep.
And that one calls for the addition of dry French vermouth. And now that is the recipe that's used at the Clover Club in Brooklyn. So dry French vermouth, is one difference there. The other difference is that it's made with the raspberry syrup as opposed to the fresh raspberries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we really just wanted to see kind of how these things change the cocktail.
Yeah. So you can make your second, if you haven't already made your second cocktail, you can make your second or your third cocktail a couple of different ways. One, if you've made the raspberry syrup recipe, I'm going to drop the recipe for the Clover Club that uses the raspberry syrup. And I'll also include the recipe for the syrup itself, so you can write it down. And then, so you can choose to make the same version with the raspberry syrup, or you could also choose to make the Julie Reiner. Julie Reiner. This is what you get for reading things instead of hearing things.
True.
Because I'm not from New York. You can make Julie's recipe, which uses a dry vermouth. So I'm going to put those in the chat, and then you can get started talking about Julie's. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put Julie's in first.
I don't have too much to say about it, although it is the first Clover Club that I ever tasted was the dry vermouth and raspberry syrup kind. And I think the raspberry syrup has just got, and especially, it of course depends how you're making the syrup, but if you're heating your raspberry or you're using hot water, there's a little bit more depth of flavor that's going to come through, just a little bit more richness from those raspberries, which I think in this cocktail works really well. And I mean, I really wonder where that departure between the dry vermouth and not happened.
Mm-hmm.
Very curious to find out about that.
It was sometime between 1901, when the original recipe, and 1917, when they said, hey, vermouth is good in this. I see some folks asking about the raspberry syrup. The raspberry syrup that we use is actually one that Jeffrey Morgenthaler recommends in his bar book. And that's the one that we included in the email that we sent out, which you can make on the stove. And it's 2 cups of fresh or frozen raspberries to 8 ounces of water to 1 cup of granulated sugar. And you just kind of let those all mix and meld and macerate, and then and cook down a little bit with a little bit of heat. You don't want to overheat it. And then you'll strain out all the pulp from the raspberries. Sean made a quick raspberry syrup by actually just taking simple syrup, dumping a bunch of raspberries in it, muddling it, letting it sit for a couple of hours. He didn't even heat it, and then straining it out.
And that's this one?
That was the one we used last week. This is the one that the recipe I'm gonna drop that we heated. Yeah.
Cool. I think in this case, for the sake of seeing the difference, I think the difference will be more drastic if you're looking at a heated raspberry syrup versus the fresh raspberries.
Because it'll extract more flavor, right?
And it concentrates the flavors. Mm-hmm. When you make a syrup out of, especially when you're using fruit and there's any kind of time for a reduction of any sort to happen on the stove, you just get such a more concentrated and pronounced flavor. It's a little bit deeper. You lose some of those higher, brighter notes. But, you can kind of play with it and kind of see what your preference is for your raspberry syrup. But I went ahead and added a 1/2 ounce of the raspberry syrup into my tin. So if you're following along.
And if you don't have the raspberry syrup, you can just use fresh raspberries again, right? Use 4 to 6 raspberries. If you used 4 the first time and it wasn't quite raspberry enough, punch it up, or you can dial it down. Totally. You can also do what I think John said, which was he pulled some frozen raspberries out of his freezer, popped them in the microwave, or let them come to room temperature and use those. I mean, they're frozen at the peak of their ripeness, and that's a great way to do it. Yeah. We have also been known to pull a nice fruit-only raspberry preserves or raspberry jam out of the fridge. Plop that in there. If you don't have fresh or frozen raspberries or raspberry syrup, you can get creative. It may not be the same results, but we've done it before, and we've blogged about it before, and I know that it's good because I've done it before.
And I mean, not to wax poetic about syrups for too long, but another way that you can make a cold syrup, and one that I actually really love, we used a lot at Pouring Ribbons, which was, I haven't mentioned much about my resume, but the last bar that I worked at in New York City was Pouring Ribbons. That was my bar home, and I miss them dearly. And a technique that we used a lot when making syrups was just the blender method. So no heat. You'd add all your ingredients into the blender. So in this case, raspberries, sugar, and water, and blitz that until it's fully combined and your sugar looks dissolved, which sometimes can take about a minute or two, but depending on your blender. But I mean, it is a very quick, easy, and convenient way to get a lot of flavor payoff because you know you're blending all of that. I've done that with rosemary before. I made a rosemary syrup, so just rosemary leaves.
Yeah, we talked about that
water.
with Megan when we did the mint julep. If you've got some mint that's like a little, maybe not the freshest for a garnish, is making a mint simple syrup and is just blending that mint into the simple syrup and then straining it out. Easy, fast. There's a lot of different ways to get raspberry into your cocktail. And I think the point here is, which way do you want to do? Which way's too much work? Don't do that one. What do you want to do? Do it.
Yeah.
All right.
So for the Reiner recipe, remind me, how much lemon are we using?
It's
now I've got 5 Clover Club recipes hanging out in my head.
So Reiner's recipe is 1.5 ounce gin, a 1/2 ounce dry vermouth, a 1/2 ounce lemon juice, a 1/2 ounce raspberry syrup, and a 1/4 ounce egg white. So this one will demonstrate what it looks like when we only use a 1/4 ounce instead of 3/4 ounce of egg. This is one of these great recipes where I think you can just begin to adjust the things to your taste and experience preference.
So half dry, yeah?
Yeah, half dry, half lemon, half raspberry. And I think Julie specifically uses Plymouth for her gin.
Did I use Blanc?
And Dolan. Yes, you use Blanc, but you know, why not?
Here we are.
I'm always so impressed when people can come into our bar for the first time and do it for the first time, making a drink, like, on camera to folks. She's doing great. So what did y'all use for your gins? I think you chatted about it a little bit earlier, but I'm curious if you've tried different gins, if you've made your second cocktail. What did you find out from your first cocktail? And if you're making or you make your second cocktail, that's one of the things I always love to ask is, what did you mix up and what did you like best? Did you experiment and you're like, no, the original one was way better, I'm going to do that? Or did you try something new the second time and you like it better and you're super excited about it? I always love to learn what you all are learning too. So make sure to put that in the chat.
I chose this one because it kind of reminds me of the Clover Club.
It's beautiful.
Okay. So we're going to do that 1/4 ounce of egg white.
Do you want to beat it with a fork real quick?
Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a challenge.
It's a little. You can pour some of it out if you want. So again, if that egg white is sticking together, just give it a little beat. It'll break up some of that tension.
All right. Do 1/4 ounce here. Still tough.
It's very happy egg white. It really wants to be in a cocktail.
So bad. Okay, perfect.
All right, Diane's using Bombay.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that option for this cocktail because that, I mean, Bombay is like really, you've got a lot of that juniper, a lot of those botanicals kind of right in your face. And like I said, I think that cuts through a lot of the noise in this cocktail. Okay.
Dry
shaking. Still going to dry shake, just FYI. Oh, small tip for like the nerdy folks out there. If you're looking for a really good whip, you keep it kind of tight, and you can get like some real good, just nice little, almost like a circular motion. Almost better aeration than if you're doing
back and forth and back. Okay, Daniel's going to mention, he mentioned this earlier, the reverse dry shake.
Yeah.
You know about that.
Yeah.
Tell us about the reverse dry shake while I go fix my mic.
So the reverse dry shake means that you would be adding your ice first, shaking with ice, straining your cocktail back into the tin, dump your ice out, and then do a dry shake. So instead of starting with the dry shake and then adding ice, you're flipping it. Personally, I haven't been the biggest fan of that. I found that my cocktail winds up a little bit more like watery, more diluted. And I think it's because when you start with the dry shake, your egg white has time to, that word I used, emulsify with all those ingredients, and then you're diluting with the ice, as opposed to doing the reverse. And I've just found it leaves me with, I always have more cocktail and more liquid and less froth when I do the reverse dry
because
shake.
The egg just doesn't have enough time.
Yeah, but I mean,
to whip and emulsify?
We can absolutely try it. I recommend if you are really interested in it, because there are some like really well-known and well-respected cocktail bars that swear by a reverse dry shake. So it's the kind of thing where even the best of the best kind of have different opinions on it, for sure. So
well, there you go, Daniel. Thanks for elevating again.
Totally.
He says it makes the egg a bit more frothy since you never have the ice in with the egg. We should do a side-by-side test sometime.
Never have the ice in with egg.
Okay, so
then
Daniel's
you're shaking. So what you're doing then is you're shaking without the egg, diluting.
He says shakes everything without the egg.
I see.
And then strain it and then shake it together.
Yeah.
So then it's just staying in there. I would think that, and I don't know depending on how much egg you're using, the egg never touches the ice. If you're using a lot of egg, then the egg also doesn't benefit from being chilled. No. And so it might slightly warm up your cocktail by adding a warm ingredient after you've already removed the ice from the rest. But if you're like the 1/4 ounce kind of egg person, it may not make that much of a difference from a temperature standpoint.
Yeah.
I love these discussions.
No, me too. I mean, I think that was why you and I were like, okay, we've got 8 different Clover Clubs we want to make. Let's do them.
And as Tom astutely observes, if you forget to add your egg white in the first time, just do a reverse dry shake.
There you go. I've got it figured out.
There's a question about sort of like to strain or not to strain your raspberries for your raspberry syrup. Obviously, if you're muddling raspberries, I mean, either way, if you're using a fine strainer here, whether you use muddled raspberries or syrup, you're going to strain most of those seeds out. And so for your syrup, I think if Stefan were here, he would say that he likes to, to strain it. And I think pressing through a fine strainer is the kind of thing that just makes it a little bit easier when you're making a cocktail. You don't run into as much pulpiness when you're actually trying to strain it out, right?
I prefer to strain my syrups if there's any solids. I mean, I don't know if this is folklore, but in my head, if there are raspberry solids in my syrup, it's more likely to go bad more quickly. I don't know if that's real
from a
science.
Storage standpoint.
I like to strain all of the solids out of my syrups as much as possible, because then the syrup's going to change too, right? If you've got that ingredient still sitting inside the syrup, so depending on what it is, maybe not so much raspberry, but if it's an herb or something like that, it's going to continue to infuse, and it could oxidize or, so I'd rather just strain any solids out of any syrup that I make before bottling it, personally.
That's our tip. Maria went so far as to do cheesecloth.
Yes. If you
patient woman.
I don't have it in me oftentimes.
But you can, and I think that's the benefit of sometimes making syrups ahead of time as well. So that's a beautiful, beautiful,
pretty little guy.
So this is what we're looking at with only a 1/4 ounce of egg white. I see a little bit of that foam. It's hard to tell because the light is just casting this beautiful, like, photographer's friend glow on it.
Right.
But the foamy head on this one is definitely a lot more delicate. So, Jamie, if we were making the original recipe, the first one that we did, with the syrup instead of just the muddled raspberries, we would use 3/4 of an ounce of raspberry syrup. And then you would not use the simple syrup.
No. So you've already got your sugar in that raspberry syrup.
So if you're using a raspberry syrup recipe, it's your raspberries and your simple syrup combined already. And so that's why you would use 3/4 of an ounce. It's good. That's the one.
Okay. Here are my thoughts.
True thoughts.
What the vermouth does. So you guys heard me waxing poetic about the botanicals in a London dry gin, right? And why you would want something that was a little bit more juniper forward as opposed to something that were a little bit lighter in profile or more like floral. That's because I'm looking for the gin to kind of punch through the raspberry and all the egg white and all the other ingredients in this cocktail. The addition of the vermouth, because vermouth is also botanical, it just bumps everything up a little bit more. And I don't even necessarily notice that there's vermouth in the cocktail. What I think it's doing is really highlighting the gin. And so there are some brighter, higher notes in the cocktail to kind of layer on top of the lush egg white and the rich raspberry syrup.
You heard it here.
So you've just got a little bit more depth, more layers there.
Yes, absolutely. So Matt says he got a fair bit of foam on the second recipe. Maybe, and sometimes, honestly, the freshness of your egg white, that can matter. How long you shake and aerate. Maybe whether you did the reverse dry shake or not. Yeah. We'll have to do a side-by-side comparison on that as well. And then I just wanted to address, I think Tom's comment is, can you do this with raspberry jam? So yes, you absolutely can. And I will actually put in here, I think I've got a recipe for raspberry jam. I definitely do. I did such a deep dive into the Clover Club a couple of years ago. When for those of you that don't know, my husband Sean and I have a barware company called Standard Spoon. We've been doing that for 7 years. And when we started getting into like publishing cocktail recipes and that sort of thing, the thing that we wanted to do was to do a deep dive into that cocktail. And that's almost the genesis story for the cocktail journey. Is we were tired of these really simple, trite, this is your one-stop shop for this recipe online, and having all these different conflicting recipes. And we wanted to bring it all together and say, look, there are 6 opinions about how to make the Clover Club. Let's talk about the different ways of doing it so that you have options, whether that's fresh raspberries or raspberry syrup or raspberry jam. So I had published this really long, extensive blog post on the Clover Club, and we took some beautiful photos, and we did this whole little thing because I just feel like this is the cocktail for lovers. People who love cocktails.
I mean, I remember the first time I had a Clover Club. It was, like I said, at Clover Club in Brooklyn. And they had actually split it into 2. I was with my partner at the time. And they split it into these 2 adorable little coupes. And I just remember it was such an experience to have those beautiful, like, pink, frothy, tiny little baby cocktails in front of me.
It's beautiful. Yeah. It's a wonderful drink.
And it's also, the classic of classics, the egg white cocktail. It's a sour. I always call cocktails formulas, It's a formula that you can play with once you understand how the components work within it. So.
Yep. I'm going to rinse some tins real quick.
Yeah.
And
I saw the question for the vermouth actually.
Yeah, talk a little bit about vermouth.
So the original recipe calls for French vermouth, and I believe that is how they make it at Clover Club, if I saw correctly. Let me grab, here we go. So the Dolan Dry, which is actually the vermouth that you'll find most commonly at a liquor store. So, I mean, these are really nice because they're kind of not gentle, but almost delicate as far as vermouths go. One thing I want to make sure that you're doing, it's something that people still need to be reminded of, you need to keep this in the fridge once you open it. Vermouth is a fortified wine, so it is a wine product. It will oxidize and go bad if you leave it out, and it'll start to taste like vinegar, which is a lot of why people are afraid of adding vermouth to their cocktails or to their martinis. You want to make sure that you're keeping it cold. And then Dolan also produces a Blanc vermouth, which I actually accidentally grabbed the Blanc because I'm not in my home bar. I'm in a foreign bar, so I grabbed the Blanc by accident. And it was beautiful in this cocktail. The Blanc is going to be a little bit sweeter. The Dry, you're going to get a little bit more of like a bite, astringent kind of note. But again, I think that the vermouth really helped to bump up the notes in the gin in this cocktail. So I'm a huge fan of vermouth. I drink it on the rocks in the summer with a twist of lemon or some fruit. I absolutely adore drinking vermouth. I don't know if you feel the same.
I would love to hear how many of you made a Clover Club with the vermouth, and what's your preference, with or without vermouth? If I had my technical savvy ready, I would actually do a poll. Because I think we can do that on live streams at some point.
Yeah.
We can poll the audience.
Totally.
We might do that. And so, probably not on YouTube. I think it's via another platform or so. But we can do, the quick poll, which is just drop it in the chat.
Yep.
Let us know if you prefer vermouth or no vermouth.
And there are other styles of vermouth out there as well. There are Italian vermouths, but the recipe for the Clover Club calls specifically for French vermouth. So Dolan, I think, is probably the easiest to recommend because, like I said, it's the easiest to find, but also it seems as though it might have been the closest to what was originally used in that ideal bartender spec from Tom Bolt. So
I'm going to make, with 7 minutes left in the hour, I don't know if anyone has been waiting for the non-alcoholic or the spirit-free cocktail of the evening other than me, but I'm going to make the spirit-free cocktail of the evening, which is a modified Clover Club. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to just replace the gin with this. I had experimented a little bit with some coconut water, and I wasn't a huge fan. So I'm going to go the tea method. And then while I'm making my NA cocktail, and I'll put the recipe in the chat as well, put your comments in the chat. I'm going to put the chat up here so V, you can you can check out what everyone's saying
Hard
and
to tell, both are good.
answer some questions. If this is a great time, you guys, we got 7 minutes left. So if you got questions about this cocktail, if you just want to celebrate something about it that you really liked,
anything, talk to me.
this is it. This is ask anything.
I don't get to stand behind the bar anymore and have amazing guests like you guys all the time. So any questions, comments, etc., happy to hear it.
Yep.
So which tea did you go with?
So I went with the rooibos tea with rose hips.
Oh, right.
We thought maybe it might be a little on the floral side. Floral Absolutely. Plus the raspberry. If you wanted to, I'm going to have to go get some more botanical-based teas, right? That would be lovely. Okay.
What about,
can I have the raspberry syrup and the lemon?
Of course.
So I'm not
What
really...
about bourbon instead of gin? I think bourbon would work beautifully in this cocktail. Although I would be really curious to try a rye instead. So all those botanicals in the gin, bourbon is going to be a little bit sweeter than rye, right? Bourbon's going to be a little bit sweeter than rye, right? It's produced from corn, whereas rye is produced from rye. So you've got a little bit of spice there that I think might kind of mirror the botanical bite of the gin in this cocktail. So I would probably try rye over bourbon, but I think bourbon would work beautifully as well. I also like bourbon with strawberries quite a bit. I think those two flavors work really well together. So,
and I have to say, all right, I'll just let you know.
Oh, you got a good question.
Okay, good question. Oh yeah, the
Did
Pink Lady.
Did this cocktail come before or after the Pink Lady?
We were talking about that.
We were.
Can you tell us?
And I believe this came before, or it just got replaced by the Pink Lady. Is that what it was?
So this cocktail
She's done more research than I have on the
before the Pink Lady. And then what happened was, so originally, remember, this started as a drink that was consumed by, upper class intellectuals in a private room in Philadelphia, and then made its way to New York, and it was served publicly at the hotel and published. But then it fell out of fashion with, I think, the men in the men's club because they saw a pink cocktail and they said, this is a ladies' drink.
I'm sure Prohibition had a little...
And Prohibition had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But then it also... And so then Prohibition just put the kibosh on things. Mm-hmm. But the Pink Lady, I think, was before, still pre-Prohibition. The Pink Lady is essentially a Clover Club that is also made with Applejack, which we brought today, and we said if we had time, we would make one. I don't think we have time today.
Here we are with 3 minutes.
But that would be a variation of the Clover Club that just, it punches it up, and so it's a little bit less delicate and, I don't know, maybe romantic. It's a little bit more boozy and punchy. Not in a punch way, but in a...
Yeah, the Applejack
way
really punches through. And Sienna asked if there's a version with strawberries and rye. Not officially, but exactly what John said. I'm tasking you with making it because I think it would be delicious.
The thing I was going to say before we answered the question about the Pink Lady is that, true story, if any of you saw the video that Sean posted on our Instagram of me making a Clover Club, and it's actually in our Kickstarter video as well, we ran out of gin because we were making a lot of Clover Clubs, and the thing is that white rum looks just like gin in a video. And so we used Hamilton White Stash to make the Clover Club, and it was amazing. So if you wanted to, you could also just put rum in instead of gin, and it was a delightful cocktail. It was fantastic.
I would love to see that with a white rum as you used, or even a rum agricole, because it's got that nice grassy kind of funk to it. I think would be beautiful for my rum fans out there who like agricole rums. Definitely would be a delicious variation.
You're going all the way to the top of the hour making cocktails. It's amazing.
I mean, I was seconds away from rushing to make a Pink Lady.
You can make one. If you guys want to keep the party going.
I'm gonna rush to make a Pink Lady real quick.
Okay, so for those of you who are only here for the hour, this has been the cocktail journey.
Yay.
And I think this is maybe our 15th live stream. We've been doing these weekly. We are right in the middle of our public launch, which means there's a lot more that we're doing here other than meeting weekly and making cocktails. And you can find out more about that at thecocktailjourney.com. We launched a crowdfunding campaign last week. So we're about a week in. We're 30% funded. The crowdfunding campaign is just one of the things that we're doing on working towards our goal of getting 1,000 members to join us in the next month. And that is going to enable us to do a lot more, including build out some beautiful on-demand content, video classes, tutorials, more live, and then eventually in-person events, all centered around making really quality cocktails. This really easy-to-follow home bar framework, kind of a choose-your-adventure style experience with people like us who love exploring cocktails, no matter where you are on your cocktail journey. So check us out at thecocktailjourney.com. Quick PSA, if you are on Clubhouse, if you're on Clubhouse, find me. I'm Rachel Eva on Clubhouse, and we're going to be doing a Clubhouse room next week around cocktails, which may turn into a weekly thing. If you want to learn more about that, follow The Cocktail Journey on Instagram. That's tcj.321 on Instagram. We'll be publishing about Clubhouse events there. V is also on Clubhouse. You can find her there.
I am.
And if you're one of those people who says, if you know what Clubhouse is, and you're like, but I don't have an invite, you should just message me, because I have some, and I will invite you. I've been saving them, because I'm not just going to willy-nilly give them away, and I'm not going to sell them like some people do. If you do not know what Clubhouse is, that's okay. There's a lot of people who don't, and we'll tell you more about that on a future live stream. If you want to stick around, we're going to make an NA cocktail and a pink lady, so you get a bonus, 15 minutes with us. We're going to stick around. If you got to go do other things, we're so happy you joined us. Come back next week. Next week, we're doing the Gold Rush cocktail. Ooh, another New York original.
One of my favorites.
Right? Whiskey, lemon, honey. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be delicious. We're going to have Megan Balzer here, who's really excited about this cocktail. And we'll keep making drinks every week for 52 weeks. So that's the cocktail journey. We're not going to sign off, Tom, so you guys can stick around. All right. Yay. I was listening to V. See, I've got my cocktail in here that has been dry shaken, and I've got my ice in here, and I did not mix them while I was waxing poetic with our end notes. So
see?
Here we go. For all of you waiting for that ASMR, here it comes. Woo. And you're going to pink lady it.
Your shake looks good.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
You guys hear that? It wants to come out. That's why I'm holding it with two hands. We don't have our barbacks here today.
Who's the barback? Did I miss out?
Sean is usually barbacking for us. And Stefan sometimes too, you know?
Thank you guys. Thanks, Todd.
Bye, guys. All right. I'm going to do this one. I feel fancy. So this NA cocktail was basically, and I haven't put the recipe in the chat yet, it was essentially the very first recipe. I did dial the egg white down a little bit. So I dialed it down to about a ½ ounce of egg white, and then I just used 2 ounces of the double strength brew tea instead of the gin. So the wash line on there is a little bit low because this is a slightly larger coupe. These Nick and Nora's are perfect for the recipes we've been publishing. This is just one of those beautiful thrift store finds. And so it's a slightly larger volume, but I don't care. I'm going to drink it and enjoy it.
Beautiful. And I mean, now it's separating pretty nicely for, for an NA.
Yeah. That's pretty beautiful. Rebecca, I was thinking about using a pomegranate white tea, but I'm going with the rooibos because it's decaf. I have this pomegranate white tea that's been sitting up there that I want to use for a cocktail, but I'm always making cocktails when I need to.
I would use it in something that's got like grenadine, because grenadine is a pomegranate syrup essentially. I just made a really good hibiscus grenadine the other day. Ooh. It was delightful.
Look at that.
Very good.
This is that Nick and Nora honeycomb coupe.
I love this. I love
which
that.
has, I don't know if you can tell the
detail. I
detail.
don't
We've got
think
a
they
beautiful
can see
photo
that.
of this coupe on the Stand or Spoon Instagram page, which we got from our local shop, Collins and Coupe. You can find them at collinsandcoupe.com. What are the specs for the Pink Lady that you used? Do you remember them off the top of your head?
Yeah, so I kind of just did what made sense to me because I don't remember the last time I made a Pink Lady.
Okay, so these are Veronica's Pink Lady specs.
So I did 1.5 ounces of Applejack, 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, 1/2 ounce raspberry syrup, and then 1/2 ounce of egg white.
Okay, here we go.
And I've definitely seen Pink Ladies with grenadine as opposed to raspberry syrup, which is probably an 80s and 90s issue.
I like that.
Do you like it?
Mm-hmm. I love rooibos tea. It's it's earthy and sweet at the same time. You guys are gonna get bored of me using rooibos tea from all my NA cocktails on here, but I'm a fan. It's great.
Tell us about the dilution in an NA cocktail. So it really, my answer would be it depends. I think last week you guys had Brian Pergaladad on, who spoke a lot about body in a non-alcoholic cocktail. Right?
Yeah, we split the agave and the simple syrup so that to add that viscosity.
Yeah, because you are losing a lot of viscosity, you're losing a lot of flavor, and then, of course, the heat of the alcohol content when you're making a non-alcoholic cocktail. So I would say that the dilution is slightly less important depending on what you're using to mirror your spirit, you know? So if you're using, for example, well, let's say if you're using a rooibos tea versus a black tea, right? Those two are going to play a little bit differently. The black tea is going to be a little bit more astringent, right? So you'll just have to be mindful of what the ingredients you're using are. I want to taste this.
You should. It goes down real easy. We talked about gum arabic as well as...
Oh, that's delightful.
It's really good, isn't it?
It's... You know, it reminds me of what I was saying before, that I made a hibiscus grenadine. That's what that, how do you pronounce it? I'd never say it right.
Rooibos. I don't know.
I'd never say it correctly.
It's like Roobio. It's something weird.
But it's got this like really subtle spice note to it, but it tastes almost just like the Clover Clubs I've been drinking.
Well, I noticed the lack of juniper and gin.
You're like, I noticed the lack of alcohol.
I do. I definitely do. Excuse me.
Tom's making fun of my 80s and 90s issue comment. What I meant by that, I didn't get to clarify, was that grenadine tended to seem to sneak its way into a lot of our cocktails in the late 80s and the 90s. So, and of course, it was the, high fructose corn syrup, bar gun grenadine, so like not the best quality, but you'll be surprised to know that you can make grenadine at home out of fresh pomegranate juice or pomegranate just not from concentrate, pomegranate juice and sugar, and that's basically all you really need. A little bit of orange blossom water if you have it, but yeah, it's a fun ingredient to play with, especially if you make it yourself at home.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one because I've actually never made homemade grenadine.
I love it.
And I know that like I'm missing out on something. So when I think about like what's next for me on my cocktail journey, because that's what it's about, right? Everyone's at a different place. There are some people that have made grenadine like out the wazoo, but maybe they've never made a raspberry syrup. And I do this all the time because I like Clover Clubs. And so wherever you are, like identifying kind of where you want to go next. I actually bought some I think some like organic, like beautiful pomegranate juice so that I could
Yeah.
experiment with making grenadine because I was like, well, it's something I've never done before. And I'm being inspired to figure it out.
Yes.
I think I will go down a little bit on the egg white. I feel like it's
Too much.
it's almost like, I don't know, like clogging me up.
Mhm.
That's just not the thing you want to say about cocktails,
No,
but that's
but
real life.
Egg white does that, which is why I said I used to prefer the quarter ounce,
Uh-huh.
kind of a little bit lighter on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think probably because you don't have the spirit kind of punching through that, makes sense.
Mm-hmm. John also added the comment, adding a garnish of fresh raspberries is nice.
Yes.
We didn't talk about that. Typically on like shaken egg white cocktails, which are also known as it's a sour. It's a sour with egg white.
Yeah.
I was like, that's right.
A
A fizz is with bubbles.
Yes, a fizz would incorporate soda water of some sort, some kind of bubbly carbonated component.
Right, but on like an egg white sour, there's typically not a lot of garnish because the foam itself is the garnish. When we've done whiskey sours in the past, sometimes we like to garnish with bitters.
Yeah.
But Sean always likes to put a raspberry on the Clover Club as a garnish, so like go for it. We've got all these beautiful raspberries sitting here.
Especially if you have like those cute little skewers at home. Let's see. You guys have these guys. I don't even have these fancy dudes at home, but like this little guy looks really nice on the edge of a cocktail.
Isn't that beautiful?
I mean, come on.
My daughter calls the raspberries little hearts, and
Oh,
so it just
they
adds to
are.
the romance, right?
They are.
What do you think about frozen, like egg whites that have been frozen and thawed? Do you know anything about how that might change the texture of the egg white?
I've not experimented with that. No.
I don't know, Kelsey. Kelsey, if you're still around, I'm just going back and making sure we got some of those comments.
I hope you tried it.
Do you have frozen egg whites that you thawed for this cocktail? I'm curious to hear.
I think you were saying that you had saved a bunch of egg whites at some point,
Oh,
planning
no.
to use them for a project. No?
After we made Clover Clubs a couple of weeks ago, I had a bunch of egg yolks left over.
Oh.
And I put them in a little Tupperware in the fridge because I said, well, I'll make some lemon curd with it, and then I forgot.
Well,
They do not age well. Let's just say that.
Somebody mentioned that this was really great because they're a baker,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're often using egg yolks, and they tend to have a ton of egg whites left over.
Mm-hmm.
So,
John, you feel seen.
Cocktails.
Yep. These are great.
Who feels seen?
John says, some people have made grenadine out the wazoo, but never made raspberry syrup. I feel so seen. We can swap stories then, John. And Sienna says her pink lady turned out fantastic.
Awesome.
And then Kelsey says frozen egg whites work just fine for meringue.
Okay.
You should try it.
Yeah.
Experiment. If you
agree.
discover that frozen egg whites work great in a cocktail, perfect. Now you know. Virgin says these are too easy to drink.
I also agree with that. I've got about 3 half drink, not Clover Clubs anymore. I've got a pink lady here and then 2 half drink Clover Clubs. So
And we're going to make some
agree.
more. We're going to make one for Megan. And poor Sean, who couldn't be here tonight,
Aw.
is going to be coming. He's going to be coming home any minute with the kids. So we better wrap this thing up. You all, thank you so much. It was lovely to have you. V got a +1. Everyone wants to have you back. Wasn't she
Yay.
fantastic? This is so much
love
fun.
it. I would love to come back if you guys would have me. I mean, if you guys will have me.
Yeah, we'll do this again. Join us next week for the Gold Rush. Follow the Cocktail Journey on Instagram, tcj.321, and then you can find out all about like the stuff we're doing on Clubhouse. And again, if you're waiting for an invite and you don't have anyone to invite you, I have like 9 invites.
I think I have like 5 or so.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
feel free to reach out to me as well.
Come on in.
I will gladly send you a Clubhouse invite.
Yeah.
I have a lot of fun with Clubhouse.
It's a lot of
It's
fun.
like a podcast, but live.
Yeah. I feel like it's like podcast meets the chat rooms of the 80s.
Yes.
But like
yeah.
cool,
like very
right?
personal.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, y'all. Have a wonderful
Thank you, guys.
evening. We'll see you next week. Enjoy those Clover Clubs. You can make 2 or 3 more. You just use up your fresh raspberries or just eat them because they're great. Antioxidants.